How about Evan? What was his?
Edward.
What was it like bringing him into the world?
Actually, he was my easiest delivery. On January 13th, 1975, my first labor pain was at 6 a.m. And I said something to Dad, that something might be happening today. But Dad left about 20 to 7, and I hadn't had another one, and I thought, well, Dad was no sooner gone than I had another one, and it was stronger. 6:45, I had one. And then that only lasted a half an hour, so it went from 45 minutes to 30 minutes. So by the time, I tried to wait till Dad got to work. And as soon as I thought he was at work, I called him and said, you better come home. So Dad came home, took me to the doctor. They said, take her right over to the hospital. Today's your baby's birthday. And so we went over, and I had an epidural, and it worked. And he came out with this little pug nose, and he wasn't screaming like Ted was. He just went wah, wah, and he just was the easiest. While I was carrying him, I used to laugh because Ted was such a strong kicker. Oh my God. One time when I was pregnant with Ted, he woke Dad up.
With Ted or
with
Evan?
With Ted. With a kick. I was laying next to Dad and it woke Dad up. That's how hard Ted kicked. But Evan, the doctor used to tell me I was giving birth to a centipede. Because Evan was strong enough, but it was just like, just one kick after another. So, Evan was my prettiest baby. He was beautiful with his red hair and those eyelashes that didn't want to stop. He was...
What happened?
Oh, he had beautiful hair all his life. He hated his hair. He had curly hair. He hated it. It was beautiful. But he had a little widow's peak here, and he thought it looked like a vampire. So he would take a razor and he'd shave off his widow's peak. Oh, he was just... But he was such a cute little boy. And he was sick a lot as the first couple years. I think his first year infection was at 3 weeks, and he pretty much had one the rest of the time. But once he had his tonsils removed and his
adenoids?
And his adenoids and the tubes in his ears and everything, that straightened out pretty well. And he adored Ted as a toddler. Anything, I'd say, Evan, what do you want for lunch? Whatever Ted's had. It was amazing. Evan also, at an early age, exhibited the fact that, unlike Ted, nobody had authority over him. I mean, Ted never questioned our authority. But Evan, you had to prove to him that you had a right to tell him to do something. Well, how can you prove that? So, just for an example, when we moved to Bonaventure, Evan was about 4. And I had the wastebasket in the bathroom upstairs inside the cabinet. All you had to do was open the cabinet door and drop whatever you wanted in the... Well, Evan refused to do that because he said the wastebasket, 4 years old, the wastebasket should be next to the sink. I said, I don't want it there. All that's there is a vent. There wasn't room for a wastebasket. Well, that's where it should be. So we always had paper cups. So he'd take a drink of water, he'd crumble the cup, and he'd drop it on the floor. So constantly there were crumpled up cups. And if I would just do what he thought was appropriate, there wouldn't be any. So, I mean, that's typical of Evan. He thinks that his ideas are right, and if you have a different idea, then you have to prove to him why he needs to do it your way. And that has remained.
So what was he like as he grew older?
High school years weren't real easy with Evan.
No, he got more feisty.
You guys are being too nice. It's because the camera's running.
It really goes back to that attitude, I think, that we didn't have a right to tell him what to do. And I can remember a couple times Dad getting so mad at him, and Evan would just turn his head, wouldn't look at Dad. He would say, "Look at me!" And Evan wouldn't look, and I'd stand there thinking, if some big guy was screaming at me, I sure as hell would do what he wanted. But
He just seemed to always want to do the least amount that he had to do in order to get by. In most anything. I mean, I think he was excellent soccer player as a little kid, and he just kind of gave up on that. It just never really. I guess basketball's the only thing he really kind of stuck with and tried his hardest at. Certainly school, hey, what's the least amount I got to do to get by?
when Evan was 3, he taught himself to read. He literally taught himself to read. I mean, he was so smart, or is so smart. I really think if he had been in the Oak Hill school system, he would have done better, because eventually we took everybody out of St. Dominic's because of the education philosophy, among other things. But I think if Evan had been at Delshire, he would have obviously gone into the gifted program, as you and Rachel did later, and it might have interested him, you know. He wasn't interested in what was happening in class, and I think he was too far advanced, you know, in those early years for it to be interesting, and that colored his whole attitude towards school. But it was really great. The day he graduated from college, Dad and I drove up, or the day of his last class, we drove up, we took him out to dinner, and Evan looked at us and said, "I want to thank you guys for sticking by me." He said, "I don't know what was my deal all those years." He said, but you guys stuck by me, and I want to thank you. So that kind of seemed to make it all worth it.
And we always laugh because of course we took Ted to a lot of different colleges to look at. And so Evan's senior year, what colleges are you interested in? Oh, let's go to Dayton. What, do you want to go look at any place else? No, I'll just go to Dayton. So we said, well, you know, because his grades were B, I guess I'd say, in high school.
Except for Spanish, which he flunked one year.
We'd say, if you're going to go and just pedal your way through, we can send you someplace costs us a heck of a lot less money than Dayton. So we came up with the idea. We said, well, okay, you can go to Dayton as long as you keep a 3.0 average. We said if you get below it, if your cumulative grade point average somehow goes below 3, then we're going to start talking about, well, what, where else can you go that isn't as expensive? And to this day, Mom and I both recall that every semester his grade point average, cumulative grade point average, equated to a 3.0, rounded off. If rounded off, it was 3.0. And so by his senior year, we said, we should have told him he needed a 3.5. And he'd have probably done that. But, I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, his grade point average might have been a 2.985 at the end of the semester. Well, it's 3.0. So it might be a 3.004, 3.0. But it seemed like it rounded off every semester to 3.0.
And at the end of his 4 years, his GPA was 3.02.
It's like he could have done pretty much whatever he wanted. But that was the bar we set, and that was it. Wasn't going any higher than that.
Tell me the story about him hiding beer in the garage refrigerator.
Oh, it wasn't that. It was in the bushes.
Well, it was
Well, we
later
didn't know
in
that
the
until
garage.
after it happened. I don't even know that I know the details. I mean, he would just hide beer in the garage or places, and then when he'd leave, he'd go out through the garage and grab his stash, wherever it was, and take it with him.
One time I found a 6-pack of beer in the bushes in the front of the house. I said, what in the hell is this beer doing in front of the house? Well, nobody owned up to it, but we pretty much figured, well, I guess it's Evan's. But we didn't know he was doing all that hiding and stuff.
He used to like to sneak out of the house at night.
Yeah,
Well, we didn't know that.
we
until
didn't know
later.
that either, except once I knew it. Because he was down in the basement watching sports or something when we went to bed that night. And he was probably a junior in high school. It was during the summer. And next morning, we were up, of course, earlier than him, and we went down. I went down to get something out of the laundry, and he wasn't there. And I thought, well, that's funny. So I went upstairs, wasn't in his bed, and I thought, he went out after we went to bed last night. So when I got home from work that night, I said, where did you go last night? And he said, I didn't go anywhere. I slept here. And I said, no, you didn't. Don't hand me that. And he said, I did. I got up early, and I went over to Tim's. I said, Evan Edward, you no more got up early to go to somebody's house in a man in the moon. You went there last night. Well, turns out that's exactly what he did.
What is the... Tell the story about when he was caught skipping school.
He was in the 9th grade at Delhi Junior High. And well, about 9 o'clock in the morning, I was getting ready for work. I get a phone call from Mrs. Nichols, who was at the secretary at Delhi Junior High. Lauren, this is Karen. Hi, Karen. Is Evan homesick today? I said, no, he's at school. Well, he really isn't at school. And somebody called in and said she was Mrs. Reniker and that Evan was going to be sick. She said, the problem was I knew it wasn't you. And I said, okay. I said, who else is missing from school? Well, I can't really tell you that. I said, okay. I'll go through a list of some of Evan's friends, and you can clear your throat when I mention the name of somebody that isn't there. So there was only one person. That was Richie. And so I got on the phone. I figured, now where are they? They're at Richie's house, because there's no way they're going to be out walking around. Somebody will see them. So I started ringing the phone. And I rang it, as long as the phone would ring it, and then I'd dial back and keep ringing it. And I did that for about 5 minutes, just solid ringing of the phone. And I'm sitting there thinking, I hope they have a dog, and that dog is going crazy and driving them nuts. All of a sudden, the phone picks up, and I hear Richie say, hello. I said, Rich, this is Mrs. Reniker. Put Evan on the phone. Okay. Evan says, hello. And I said, you have 5 minutes to be in this house. I can't make it in 5 minutes. I said, then run. So he ran home. He gets home, and I said, get in the car. I'm taking you to school. I can't go to school. I said, yeah, you can. You're going to the principal's office with me. I can't. No, you can't make me. And I looked at him standing there, ninth grade, he was quite a bit taller than me. And I said, well, maybe you're right. Maybe physically I can't make you. Your father can physically, and he'll be home in 15 minutes if I call him. So he climbed in the car and had to go to the principal's office with me.
So let's hear one more funny story about Evan that maybe he doesn't focus on how much of a delinquent he was. And I mean that with all the love in the world.
Funny story where he's not a delinquent.
I'll tell one. He broke his arm. Evan had a few broken bones. And he had broken his arm. He was only about 5. And I had him all dressed, had you all dressed to go somewhere. So he wanted to go out front. I said, all right, do not get dirty. I don't know what he was playing around in the dirt, and he got mud on his cast. So he went over to the faucet at the front of the house, turned the water on, and washed his cast off. But everybody knows if you get a cast wet, it's useless. It just hangs. Then I had to go take him back and get it recasted. But he didn't know.
Well, I thought it was pretty funny when, was it after high school that he went down to Panama City?
Yeah.
Senior trip. And he had the car he butchered that you ended up with.
The T-Bone, the Turismo.
Turismo. He wanted to, if he could drive it down. So we hemmed and all over that. So we finally said, yeah, okay, he could go down to Panama City, Florida, with a bunch of guys. So I don't know how long they were gone, a week or something. He came back, and
Came back early.
I don't know if they came back early. Maybe they did. I just don't remember. And he was back a couple days, and he had a camera with him somehow. Took some pictures. He got these pictures developed. Took on and showing me these pictures. Well, here's my pictures from being down Panama City. And of course, it's just pictures of these guys acting goofy, you know. And so I'm going through them. And the last picture is a picture taken from a hill with some city kind of out on the horizon a little bit. See the skyline of the city. I mean, it was a pretty picture. I said, God, that's a nice picture. I said, what's this a picture of? He said, that's a picture of downtown Cincinnati. I said, what? He said, yeah, I was so glad to come home. As we came down the hill in northern Kentucky, I took a picture of downtown Cincinnati. I said, okay, that's something I didn't expect. He said, I was so glad to get home, though.